Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our heavy spoiler talk of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. You have been warned. I'm going to give you MVG's intro here to click off. MVG, how we doing?
Doing great, John. Thanks for having me on. Let's talk some spoilers.
Yes, so we are going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I'm sure a lot of the focus is going to be on the ending, some of the events leading up to it, and then what we think could happen next game if they can somehow make it even weirder. We will see. But if you missed our first discussion around this, we talked more about our general thoughts of just the overall game with light spoilers, some of the areas and some of the our experiences with the combat, materia, that sort of thing. So MVG, the ending of the game. I feel like that's what everyone wants to talk about with what happened here. I mean, there were some cool events leading up to it. Like, there were some moments I did appreciate in the game that acted as foreshadowing to the ending. And it's stuff that kind of goes under the radar a bit. But the main focus here is, as we are going through the game, there are multiple timelines. But to start, there are two, and they set these up with the original, well, just Final Fantasy VII Remake, where Zack is alive in one of the timelines. And in the other timeline, it's the typical Final Fantasy VII set of events where Zack died and Cloud survived. Whereas with Zack, Cloud is in like this coma, and we also have Aerith, who's also in a similar situation. But the entire time, they're going between the two, less so with Zack's timeline, more so with obviously our main characters just kind of going through the events of Final Fantasy VII. But it was all leading up to the ending. And, you know, as I'm looking at this, I do kind of wish there was more time with Zack. But when they did flash to him, like in these different events, there was a lot of meaning based on what was happening there, with Aerith and her white materia, that sort of thing. But what did you think of, to start, the split timelines? Because it's going to get weirder here soon.
Well, we kind of knew that this was going to happen because we have obviously played Remake, and Remake kind of took us into that split timeline thing at the end part of that game. So we knew kind of what we were kind of expecting to happen here. So with that in mind, I kind of had a good idea, John, that this was going to be a continuation on the the multiverse split timeline story that Nomura has come up with for this game. So I wasn't really surprised by it. Let's put it that way. I kind of knew that we would see that, and I know we haven't talked about it yet, but the ending with Aerith, I knew that they were gonna mix things around a little bit to make you think about what the possibility for the third game would be. And honestly, like, I've heard many different takes about what that means. What like the ending of that of Rebirth, and I think no one is inherently wrong, but I feel like the third part of this game is going to kind of shore up all these questions that we have about are we interpreting the ending of the game the way that we should be? So I think really it's up to the third game now to kind of give us those answers. But like I said, I knew that this was coming as far as the split timelines, so it wasn't a real surprise for me. And remember the start of the game as well. We haven't really talked about the start of Rebirth. That kind of throws you in very, very quickly. You kind of see what's going on with Zack. So yeah, it wasn't really a big surprise for me. What did you think?
Yes. So, well, in the beginning, you're right. Zack sees that Aerith is basically unconscious, fights off the soldiers. The other characters that we're used to, like they had Barrett, Red 13, they all died. It's like they're gone. Yeah. And it's basically him and Biggs that are left conscious and able at that time. Whereas Cloud is kind of in his wheelchair with the Mako poisoning, and Aerith is in a coma at that time. But the split timeline, the entire time we're going through the events, there's a lot of them foreshadowing it eventually crashing together. And it crashed together in such a way that people are making charts online right now to explain what happens, because it is that confusing and all over the place, and to the point where you have to basically watch or play through the ending a couple of times, and I'm not kidding, take notes to sort of figure out what it was. Very quick. The cuts were happening. They tried to explain what was going on by using that dog stamp.
Yep.
So they showed Stamp multiple times in different forms, right? So I think there are 4 different versions of Stamp right now, or 5. 5. But each time they showed a different Stamp, the idea was you're in a different timeline, right? So that's how they kind of designate each timeline, and that's what people are doing now. There's like Pug Stamp.
Yeah.
There's like Stamp with that has like the star hat on. There's a Beagle Stamp. It's all over the place with this. But before we get to the ending, I do want to say we mentioned the gold saucer in the general thoughts without getting too in depth with it. I really liked the events at the gold saucer with the story, where they did recognize, like, Cloud realized how much of a star Jesse was there. And they had, so in Remake, they did have kind of their musical number where Cloud did all the dancing and stuff to so that he could get the costume and stuff and dress up and, go on that path with the story. But in this one, they actually had a pretty big focus on Aerith, where she did an entire like musical score. And you could see it was very, you could see online, a lot of people, it was very emotional for them, because it was kind of a send off for all the characters who had died throughout Remake. And there is something I have to point out here, MVG, because you said you didn't do the Proto Relic thing, and I held off on this. There is an entire Proto Relic. I'm not going to say which world it's in. There's an entire Proto Relic quest line. There's 4 of them where they show what happened to Wedge.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And it is, it's more violent than I thought it would be. So what happened to Wedge in Remake is he fell out of the building. Like, he just fell out. And in the the flashback, so they're going through it, and like Barrett realizes that these are flashbacks to what was happening then, and information that's coming out of like the live stream. So they show what happened to it. And there's one scene where he falls and he just hits the ground, and it's like, oh, he's dead. Like, that was it. It's like, jeez. So they show what happened to Wedge, and like, that's what I meant with some of the side quests. They were they at least got into some of the backstory as the events from Remake. But with that in mind, going into that, I thought that was a really well done scene with Aerith and her musical that she did on stage with everyone. Because at first it was like they put the VR headset on, and it's like, okay, they're kind of detached from it. Then they kind of take it off, and here's Aerith like doing her big number. And I thought that was a really cool scene for them to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some parts of the game that, would have benefited for me to play through. But look, I think what I wanted to go back and ask you, John, is what do you think about these the whispers in the game? Like, what do you think they mean in this one? Because if you remember at the end of Remake, they fight the whispers, right? And it seems like they kind of defeat them. But obviously the whispers are a very integral part of this game, the White Whispers. So why are there the whispers in? Well, why do you think the whispers are in Rebirth? And how do they return? I guess is the question I had, because that part for me was a little confusing. Like, do they kind of represent like there's like the black and white whispers, right? So do they represent fate and like good versus evil type of thing? What do you think the whispers, the idea of that is?
Yeah, because originally in Remake, the whispers it was fate trying to keep everything on track, and the idea was we're going to break away from what we know with Final Fantasy 7, and it's going to be a whole different kind of story. And the thing that I think the theme going through it was you can't escape fate. Even with this, after they kind of said we're going to do something different, it's like it keeps trying to pull them back and put them back on track. And then I feel like the whispers, so we have there's the black whispers that they were battling, and there's the white whispers as well. That, and
if you remember in the game, Cloud says that the whispers were controlled by Sephiroth.
Yes. Yep. So there's like different some whispers are fighting against him, some are with him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if these are like whispers from a different timeline, and that's where they're designated like that. So it's like the whispers are struggling and wrestling around which timeline should survive here. And that's what they're trying to do, because as we're going to be getting into soon, the timelines completely collide with each other. Like they just crash into each other. And it kind of reminded me a bit of the Flash movie, where they're starting to, if you watch that at the end, they do like timeline stuff. People are making fun of it on Twitter with different things of like, here's Nicolas Cage and stuff. But the idea of time travel, or in this case, different realities and timelines. The multiverse for Final Fantasy is that these parallel universes will exist together, but as Sephiroth mentions, they're just all doomed to eventually end up at the homecoming, as he says, or really the end of the line for the planet, like the life stream. So they all die off eventually, and it ends up getting to their final destination, really. And in some ways, it kind of has shades of Final Destination in that no matter what you do, you're still going to end up at this final point. And that's kind of what it felt like as I was going through that ending, how they were trying to set it up.
Definitely, especially with the scene as well that comes up in the game. At least in my interpretation, that's kind of how I felt. Like no matter what you tried to do to kind of change things, there's this kind of predetermined, story or predetermined fate that's always going to happen. At the end.
Yeah. Yep. That's kind of how I viewed it as well there. And so again, they're mentioned there's multiple timelines, and the idea here is they need the white materia. The white materia would be able to stop Meteor. Meteor's going to come crashing into the planet, destroy it. That was the whole thing that happened in Final Fantasy 7 at the end. Aerith casted Holy, was able to stop it. And then we got the final camera shot. This is in the PS1 version for Final Fantasy 7, where you kind of see like a Red 13 or descendant of Red 13 running up a mountain, and the planet survived. Now it's thriving again because they stopped Meteor. And in this case, the white materia in their timeline had lost its ability, it lost its power. And I feel like there's theorizing now that the Whispers may have caused that. Like when they came into contact with the Whispers, they would drain the white materia slightly. So what they needed to do was find another white materia. And to my understanding, they got it from another timeline.
This is a part of the game, John, where I'll be honest with you, it was kind of losing me a little bit with the switching back and forth. Like, I've read people's interpretations of the white materia and the Whispers, and I kind of agree with you. But like, man, I've read a lot of different kind of theories about what this means ultimately.
Yeah, this is kind of, again, this is the strange. I think there is explanation we're missing, and that's part of it is like, okay, you're gonna buy the third one to figure out what you just watched, essentially, because there are still questions around that scene, right?
Yeah.
Which we can move to here in a minute. But to my understanding, the way I'm seeing this is Sephiroth and Aerith are like the yin and yang in the game. So they both have very similar abilities. One is, I don't want to reference Star Wars too much as we talk about this, but one is like, the dark side. The other one's like the light side. And one being much more violent, obviously, with Sephiroth. But they can both, for example, communicate and live throughout these different timelines at the same time. So Aerith is able to, I guess, be aware of herself in these timelines so that she can give Cloud the white materia and then send him back so that she can get it and use it to cast Holy. Whereas Sephiroth, we see him just existing in these different universes where he's sending Zack through it by slashing the world, and that's where it gets confusing because they're jumping between them so quickly and you don't really know where you are. But
yeah, and Sephiroth at the end of the game, like right at the end, he says something like, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was like, when the boundaries of fate are opened up, we get new worlds or something like that. And
yes,
it was something along those lines. I don't remember the exact quote. So for me, it was like he's kind of ruling over everything, all the different kind of multiverses, the timelines, all the multi-worlds in the game. And yeah, that's kind of what I took away from that. It's very messy. It's very messy.
Anytime something happens, the idea then would be that another timeline's formed based on that decision and that split path. Yeah. So that's where I feel like that's where multiple things can happen from this that can either aid them or really mess them up at this point. And because at the end of the game, they essentially say that we're not making any promises for what's about to happen. Like that was a quote that they put on screen, right? Like no promises.
Well, I do hope that they have already fleshed out the story for part 3, because I hope it's not a situation where they're taking the next 2 years to kind of figure out what they're going to do. Like, because that's really going to bother me, John. Like there's a lot of this multiverse stuff that I feel like is very Nomura, if you know what I'm saying. Like he came in and kind of just switched things up a lot. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I think there's a lot of questions, and ultimately there's a lot of theories about how the game ends and what actually happens, which I think is the ultimate goal of what Nomura and Square were going for. Like they want you to ask questions, they want you to come up with your timeline or your idea of what happened, your interpretation of the game. But I hope that they actually have part 3 in play already, where all those things get answered, so we're not kind of left kind of hanging on stuff. But we'll see what happens.
I'm gonna give you some crazy off the rail idea here in a minute. Okay, don't worry, because I think that the last part can get absolutely stupid in a way, and I will give you how that could happen. But we did have Aerith lining up for the scene that we were all expecting to see, where she is supposed to die in Final Fantasy VII. I know I spoiled that for people out there. The game's really old. I don't know what to tell you, but she gets stabbed by Sephiroth. That's the idea. But in this one, Cloud stopped it at first, and I was like, okay, they are going to keep Aerith alive. But no, then there was some weird thing where it did the static, and Aerith still got stabbed. Like she was still killed. But after all that went down, you fight Sephiroth and stuff, and you end up winning. But at the end, Cloud, holding Aerith, tells her to wake up, and she does. So this is where things get a bit confusing, because there very well could be right now, as they're not really focusing on it because they then went to the ending scene where they're flying off. There could be a universe now where Aerith is actually alive in the game.
Yeah. This for me, look, the ending of the game was probably the weakest part of Rebirth. After 40 hours or so of playing the game, the ending was, it almost lost me, John. I got to be honest, it almost lost me. But I did go through it, and you're right. Like there is a lot left up to interpretation here, because once she wakes up, you see you see blood. And then it cuts, and then you don't see blood, right? Like, and then you do. So for me, I personally think, and this is just me, I personally think, and other people have different takes, I think that Aerith is dead, and I think she's kind of accepted her fate, that she's no longer alive in this universe anymore. But with that said, like I said, Nomura maybe hasn't the plan with this multiverse stuff, that she's actually still alive in the other multiverse, right? But for me, I kind of took away feeling like no matter what Cloud tried to do to stop it, she kind of had accepted her fate, that she was going to die no matter what. But I've heard some different takes. I've heard people say no, she's well and truly alive. I've heard, I heard this wild one where at the end of the game, where everyone's kind of mourning Aerith's death, waiting to kind of leave. But Cloud can still see her. And there's that one scene of Tifa, like with her head down, crouched over, whatever, really sad. I saw some YouTube video where some guy said that Tifa got friend zoned by Cloud because he ended up choosing Aerith, and she's sad because Cloud doesn't like her or something, which I thought was just ridiculous. So there's so many different takes on this, but I think Aerith is dead, and I think ultimately all roads or all multiverses will point to that she's no longer alive.
I think you're right. I think what the main timeline, I think Aerith is dead. I think there is a secondary timeline where she's alive in some way at that point, but then she's going to probably die again later. And I sort of feel like the third one is going to be Cloud accepting that she's not alive anymore, is the idea.
Yeah.
And I think because the idea is they return to the live stream. So I feel like it's going to be that setup, like, again, I don't want to reference Star Wars too much, but like she's still kind of alive, but she's not. And she'll still play into the end of the game to where they all come together. Most likely they stop the meteor, Holy's cast, and they have that glimpse of Aerith stopping it, that kind of thing. But I do wonder if they're going to play into that timeline where she's still alive in some way, similar to how Zack clashed into this timeline, where they had the battle where him and Cloud were fighting together, and then afterwards he's pulled back out, and he said, I guess that's it for now. So I feel like he's probably coming back in the third one in some way. But that's sort of what I think is going to happen. Is we've gone through, so we have the first game remake. Now we're into Rebirth, where there's like the mourning that's happened. And I think in the third one, it's going to be about acceptance. And then they're going to most likely still do some crazy stuff with the multiple different universes. And my wild theory here, MVG, the thing that I think would take this to the next level and potentially could annoy everyone, but they are able to now play into, I feel like, multiple timelines, multiple universes, and multiple dimensions.
Yeah.
Which means you might see them do crossovers with other Final Fantasy worlds.
Oh my God. I mean, you can't rule it out, can you?
I can't.
Nomura loves doing this stuff. I mean, this is turning into Kingdom Hearts real quick, the way things are going.
I thought about that. I was like, man, what if at the end of this whole trilogy, like Cloud ends up in the Kingdom Hearts 4 world or something crazy? But there's been a lot of rumors and discussion around references between 10 and 7. And I thought about that. Like, what if they did something weird where they threw more of those references in the third one, and then at the end somehow Tidus shows up, something crazy. That is the only way I feel like it could go to the next level, outside of them somehow splintering these different universes all further to just be more confusing in general with Zack and Sephiroth and Cloud.
So just go back to the scene, right? The Aerith scene. What did you think about it? Like, I kind of gave you my take, but how did you feel when all that unfolded? Assuming that you had no idea what was happening. Like, I kept away from spoilers in this game. I had no idea what was coming. So how did you feel about it?
I kind of feel like what they did with these multiple universes allowed them to cop out a bit with this one. So I would not have done it in this way. I would have been much more straightforward and impactful with it. I don't think they could show her getting stabbed with the blood and it still being a teen rated game. I kind of think that was an issue that they had to figure out, because with the PS1, I mean, you see the visuals, blocky people. It's a bit easier to do that and say, okay, it's still teen rated. But in this case, I feel like that might have put it over the edge into mature rating. And maybe they weren't willing to go that far with it. But the thing that I feel like was not as impactful was the send off for Aerith, because if she is truly dead in that timeline, there was a much better way to do it with how they did with Final Fantasy VII, where Cloud like lowered her into the water and they had her theme playing, and it was kind of like, ooh, one of the characters in my party actually legitimately died. They're gone. Yeah.
And then they went snowboarding 30 minutes later.
They did. But like, I think the scene was better done in the original one. I just think it was. When she dies, you still have to fight a boss battle, and they don't play the typical battle theme. They have her theme playing the entire way through that like 5 or 6 minute boss battle. And the realization of loss of one of your characters then was so much more impactful than here, because they just show her alive next to Cloud and they're like, oh, okay, she's a ghost now. All right.
Okay. I agree. I mean, it's very hard to pull off the same trick twice, I guess. And, you have to give them credit for kind of switching it up a little bit. But look, for me, the death of Aerith in the original is such a like shocking, iconic moment that just sticks with you, for forever, right? And honestly, I think the developers, I don't want to say they just kind of pushed the explanation to the next game, but they kind of did, like they're kind of keeping us guessing here as to what's going to happen, what the fate of Aerith is in the next game. I do agree that I think that Aerith will be in the next game in some capacity, whether that's via flashbacks or some other multiverse or universe that opens up that she's in. I don't think she's not going to be a part of the third game. But yeah, I think the developers, are keeping us guessing here, John. Honestly, I think that's really what only I can say about it.
Yeah, I would have what I would have played it off as in her dying, that maybe there being some sort of boss battle, and then you can do the send off, whether it's in the water like they did originally or something a little different. But I feel like ending it on a very like somber note like that, and then heading up north with apparently Cloud having the black materia. Again, I'm not really sure what that's going to turn into. No one does. We're all kind of like, okay, what is that going to do? What are you going to do with that exactly? Because you're bringing it to Sephiroth up north. But
Yeah.
I think that would have been the better way to end it, with Aerith dying and then the game ending a few minutes later, legitimately, as
Mhm.
like that's like the mid. We're halfway through. Well, we're 2/3 of the way through the trilogy. This is supposed to be the bad guys winning, essentially the end, right? Where
Yeah.
they lost like that, and now they got to figure out how to regroup and then win at the end. So I think they could have gone much more impactful with this whole thing, but that's me.
I think the other kind of take that I guess you can't rule out that I think about occasionally is that Cloud is simply crazy. Because I mean, he starts to lose it,
Yeah.
in Rebirth. He's got that Marco poisoning. He's
Yep.
in that catatonic state. He's kind of, he has these like blackouts and stuff. And maybe he's just kind of tripping that all this is happening. That Aerith is still alive, in his own mind, when she's well and truly not alive at all. So there's that kind of aspect of the game that I think about as well, whether this is just him, in his head at this
In his own
point.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That could be him just trying to deal with the loss of Aerith, and
Yep.
he's like, she's not actually, no, she's here with me. And
Yeah.
they keep doing that where they show her in the field, then they show everyone else's perspective, and it's like, no, she's not. And then he looks up at the sky, and
Yeah.
there's that cut in the sky. He sees it. No one else does.
That's
But
right.
apparently, what that means is that means that the world that they're in is doomed.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
idea. So maybe what we're seeing right now is not the main timeline that's meant to survive. Maybe we're in a timeline this whole time that is meant to just basically die out.
Yeah.
So
You could be
that's what I
right.
mean. That this one dies out, and all of a sudden Sora wakes up in Kingdom Hearts 4, and we're good to go. We're
Yeah,
good to go.
we'll have to wait 5 years for this next game to
I'll
come out.
I'll ask you one thing, MVG, before we sign off here. In the third one,
Mhm.
do you think they kill off Cloud?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. I think Cloud will,
Okay.
will live in the game. I think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I wondered that. I'm like, maybe they just kill him in one of the timelines, and
Mhm.
they just go that route. But
But
I don't know.
again, having that iconic, shocking death scene in the original game, we kind of knew that they were going to do something, right? So we're expecting something to happen.
Yep.
So who knows? Something may happen to Cloud in part
Oh,
3.
I meant to bring this up earlier, real quick. The weapons in the game,
Yeah.
the whales, I didn't like them.
No, I did.
I wanted Ruby, and I wanted Emerald, and I wanted Sapphire. I wanted the big
Yes.
guys.
Yeah.
I haven't
Same.
seen them yet.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the big thing for the third one. Maybe we
Yeah.
get them, and it's
I
like a
hope
big
so.
deal.
I mean, I think the third one's obviously going to bookend the
Yes.
trilogy quite nicely. We'll see. It's a lot to take in, especially at the end of Rebirth. Trying to kind of make sense of what has happened here. Again, I just hope that they have this all figured out and they're not kind of just writing
Flying
as
by the
as
seat
we
of their
go.
pants.
Because that would not be a good thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, the multiverse thing can be seen as kind of a way out of working your way into a corner. I hope that's not the case here, and I hope that they already figured out the end point and they're just figuring out how to get there. So,
Hopefully.
but we will see, as you mentioned here, probably 3 or 4 years. A lot of the work's already done for the next one, though, because they're going to rely on the same world that they've already built. So
Nice.
at least there's that. I think they're going to fit into this generation. I think we'll have the entire trilogy on the PS5. So
That'll be good.
really
I mean, I think what would be really cool is if they can offer some type of trilogy set eventually that has everything kind of maybe on the PS6. They've got
big
like
box set.
it's like
Ooh,
one
I would buy
game.
that.
It's like 250 gigabyte download that has just the whole thing. Maybe they've you give it the treatment, the remaster treatment, where you take out things that didn't really work and you remove some of the padding and kind of just make it more flow a lot better. I think that would be interesting to see them do that.
Oh, then we get just one Final Fantasy VII release, and
That'd be cool.
Oh, that
That'd
would
be
be cool.
I like that.
I'd be on board for that. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Of course, you can check out the first one. It is up over on the Spawncast Network. You can check the links down below to sign up there, or you can become a member here and support the show. So thanks everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed our thoughts around Final Fantasy VII with the spoiler talk here, and you can leave your comments down below. Give us your best theories, because everyone's just we're trying to figure it out. People got charts all over the place. They're like Charlie up at 2 a.m. with the red string going across the board. So let us know what you guys think, and we'll see you guys next time.